I was praying earlier a little while ago, and something that I was saying to God, or something that I found myself writing down in my notebook, because I usually write my prayers down, was thank you, my God, because you're beginning to teach me the beauty in sacrifice. And for me, that was more related to my mundane life, right? Like, I remember when I was younger, I would often think that making my bed was like a waste of time, or for example, cooking. I felt like it was just very boring. Like, why do I have to cook, and why do I have to eat to sustain my body? Things like that. Like, or like even washing my car. Like, it'd be like, I always did wash my car, but I would find less joy in doing so. Like, it's just another task on my to-do list that I have to get done, and not doing it with too much joy, I guess. And recently, I've been really, really enjoying those typical mundane things, like getting the opportunity to cook some rice and thinking a bit deeper into it. Like, this might feel a little bit like a waste of time if I let myself let it feel that way, right? But if I look further into it, it's like, oh, I'm getting to make food for somebody that has been working all day, and it's going to be a sense of solace for them to have some warm food, or getting to wash my car, which I have not done today. But I'll motivate myself to do it later. It's like I get to clean my car so I can have a nice, clean environment to drive in, or things like that, or like showering. Sure, have to shower every single day, but it's like now it's that sense of love. Doing it in a place out of a place of love makes those mundane things that feel like little sufferings, little sacrifices, little wastes, little irks, um they turn into an act of love towards yourself and towards those around you, when you let yourself be more intentional about why you're doing it, and thinking a bit further on it. But yeah, so I wanted to make a video on that. And I have some quotes that I took down. It says, walk in love, not in fear. And I've always liked this quote since I was younger. And it's such a typical quote, like cheesy quote, like walk in love, not in fear. But when you look deeper into it, it really means a lot, in the sense that this is what the spiritual war is, right? We, as Catholics, sometimes we talk about spiritual warfare. And this is what the spiritual war is, right? It's not like we have swords and we go out and fight people. Like, we're not good at physical fighting and such. We don't take training in combat, but technically we take training in combat in the act of love, right? Like, when we're driving down the highway, this is the most typical thing ever. When you're driving down the highway and someone just comes in and cuts you at full speed, no turn signal, no nothing, it's like, in that moment, a part of you is like, man, I want to tailgate you and blow my horn at you. Or, I don't know, some people road rage, right? I don't road rage too much anymore, but I feel like some people, do road rage a lot. And it's like, in that moment, those are your instincts. It's like, why would somebody be that rude to cut me off, not turn their turn signal on? And then it's like, but this is where the war is. You become intentional about it, and you pause for a moment, instead of tailgating them, instead of blowing your horn at them, and who knows what else. You take a moment and you're like, wait, maybe they are speeding to the hospital. Maybe one of their family members just had a horrible accident, so they threw them in their car and they're like speeding towards a hospital because they don't have the money to afford an ambulance. So that's their turn signal is like the last thing that they have on their mind right now. Things like that. It's like, or maybe they're having a horrible day. Maybe they're sobbing right now and they're just trying to speed home because something bad happened to them, or they're going through something. Like, things like that. We never know how heavy someone else's day has been. Perhaps our day has been really heavy, but taking that sympathy of, yeah, my day has been heavy, and it's like, perhaps that person's day has also been heavy. And then it's like, you know what? Okay, that's okay. Maybe praying a Hail Mary for them. May God bless them. May God bless their family, their health, their finances. That's what I do usually. Like, when someone does things like me, like that to me on the highway, I'm like, they probably need a blessing. They probably do. So that's like the spiritual warfare that we live in our little daily lives. Or like, say for example, someone asks you for a favor and you're like, internally, you don't want to do that favor. Like, say someone's like, oh, can you take my clothes out of the dryer and fold it for me? I'm gonna get home really late and I'm not gonna have time to do it, and I don't want it to get wrinkled, and say you had a really long day and you're exhausted and you're like, no, I don't really want to do it. Instead of being like, you know what, nah, you do it when you get home. It's like taking that moment to be like, you know what, I'll do it out of love because I care for that person and I know they're gonna come home tired. And it's like that thing where it says, love others like you love yourself. That's why it's like walking in love, not in fear, because someone else would be like, you know what, I'm not going to have time. What if I don't have time to finish my things in the evening because I'm folding that person's clothes? It's like that's thinking in fear, whereas thinking in love would be like, you know what, I'm going to find the time to take care of everything that I need to take care of. I know it's going to be okay. It's not that big of a deal. It's an act of love, and I get the opportunity to show this person that I care about them, and to make them feel loved and cared for and make their life a little bit easier. That would be thinking in love, not in fear. And it really changes things. Or also, this is walking in liberty. So a lot of people walk a bit in slavery, and we hear this, or I hear this term often, like walking in slavery to this and to that. And a lot of people, for example, they would say walking in slavery to lust and things like that. It's like, but what about more like typical things? Just like walking in slavery to like self-restrictions and limiting thought processes. For example, maybe someone wants to take a bubble bath and they never get to take a bubble bath because they're always in a rush, or because it's a waste of water, or because it's not something that an adult should be doing in their perspective. Like limiting things like that. But it's like, why not taking the moment and the energy and the intention to be a little bit extra sweet to yourself? Because they say, if you're not kind to yourself, how are you going to be kind to others, right? If that's the way you treat yourself, what's the way that you're going to be treating other people, right? Like, you're going to be like, why am I going to do that for them? I don't even do that for myself, So it's like, well, why don't you do it for yourself? Why don't you take a little bit of extra energy out of your routine? So yeah, like I was saying, so let me think. Or another thing that I can think about for people who say we have to stop walking in slavery, walking in slavery is walking in fear, living out of fear instead of living out of love in every single sense. I'm convinced about this. For example, right now, say you're 25 and you eat really unhealthy, and it's like, yeah, but I don't feel sick or anything, and it tastes yummier, and who knows what else, and it's easier to make, It's like, but what about being a bit more intentional about that? What about when you're 60? Thinking about that, like, what if you get diabetes or cholesterol, or you get extremely overweight and then you have knee problems due to that, and then you can't walk anymore? How are you really going to be doing that to yourself? Are you really going to be making that choice of, I don't know, that feels a bit like betrayal, like knowing that you can take care of your future self by simply changing what you eat right now? That is truly an act of love, even if it takes a bit, say an extra 5 minutes to cook yourself like a healthier meal than like an unhealthy version of that, right? It's like those extra 5 minutes are an investment to your future self. It's like an investment in of love, for your future 60-year-old self to not have diabetes and not have cholesterol and not have knee problems. You know what I mean? Like little things like that. Or, for example, some people really live in that fear of what other people think about them. They're like, but what if this person says this about me because I dressed like this? Or what if this person says that about me because they saw me doing this other thing? It's like, what if they think I'm exaggerated because I went to go do that? And, things like that. What if people look at me funny because I said this, because I spoke about this, What if they don't take the truth well? Things like that. People really care about approval and about, what other people think about them. And it's like that's living in slavery to to a fleeting man's thought. Like in the Bible, it says, don't worry about it, because these people are gonna die and you're gonna die too, just like the flowers. So what are you out here worrying about? Why are we enslaving ourselves to what someone else's opinion or approval of us is? Like, don't worry about it. Just make sure that you're walking in love, and you got you good. You know what I mean? Like, something else I was thinking about was how the Lord gives us so much and we don't act like it. Like, the Lord literally said, "You are my children. I've adopted you as my children. We're God's children," and we don't act like it. And I don't mean in like a cocky sense, but a lot of us, I know I did, but it's like having a low view on yourself. It's like, why do we think of ourselves as lesser than other people, or why do we not treat ourselves the way we would treat someone else? Like, this sounds a bit what do you call it, like contradictive to something I mentioned earlier. But for example, some people will be kind to others and be like, why would you ever let somebody speak to you like that? Don't let anybody speak to you like that. And things like that. But then they'll speak to themselves like that. They won't be very kind to themselves in that sense. They'll be really judgmental about themselves, really harsh on themselves, really high expectations, and perhaps unrealistic expectations with themselves. And it's like, if God loves us so fully, as his children, why don't we allow ourselves to give that same kind of unconditional love to ourselves as well? Not in a I don't know how to say it, a frivolous way, like, oh, I can go be dumb and treat people horribly, but I still love myself. It's like, no, not in that way, but in the sense of accepting that we're little humans, and we make mistakes, and we're never going to be perfect. But it's like accepting the fact that we're making our little efforts, and that's okay. And we're going to trip here and there, and that's okay, as long as we just get back up and continue on it. So that would be walking in love, not in fear. Walking in love, knowing that I can get back up from this and continue from this, instead of walking in fear. For example, if someone makes a mistake, quote unquote, mistake, and what if they, like, for example, sinned, and then they're like, God's gonna be mad at me. Oh no, God's never gonna want me in his church again. And the people at church are gonna think I'm a sinner, and who knows what else. That's like walking in fear. Walking in fear that God wouldn't love you or wouldn't forgive you, or walking in fear that someone else is gonna think lowly of you. And that wouldn't be walking in love. Walking in love would be like, I'm gonna forgive myself for making this mistake. I know I'm a weak being, and I'm gonna try to help myself do better in the future so I don't continue to do that. And I'm also gonna have the humility to accept God's forgiveness and accept that maybe I don't deserve God's forgiveness, but I'm gonna have the humility to be like, you know what, God, I appreciate the fact that you forgive me, and I'm gonna take your help. I'm gonna accept your help, and I'm gonna rely on you to help me do better in the future. So that would be like a perspective of walking in love instead of being so harsh on ourselves. So I was thinking about like the mundaneness. I know I'm all over the place, but that's how my thoughts work. So we are not supposed to live life so mindlessly. Like, we live in routines, right? We live in cycles. At least I did. I lived in a very much cycle. Like, wake up, do this, do that next. Same day again. Wake up, do this, do that next. And life is supposed to be lived intentionally. That's how we're going to run into God in the mundane things. Like, I heard in a homily once, don't take the joy of life out of living, Like, people will walk around really just frustrated, grouchy, like, oh, bro, like, this is the same thing all over again. I'm so bored. Who knows what else? And it's like, but what about the joy of living? Don't take that out of your daily life. Otherwise, how are you supposed to enjoy being alive, How are you supposed to run into God when you're out here being, I don't know, just caught up and boxed up in your own misery and grumpiness and routine? Like, it's like such a stagnant, dry, gray kind of thing. I don't know if y'all picture it, but I picture it very clearly in my head right now. Like, the just dead. It's like you're walking around dead. It's like, what about being alive? Even in your daily things, that's how you run into God. Like, I kind of lost my train of thought, but I was talking about being intentional. Being intentional, for example, about loving. Um, Say I'm walking out Walmart, the most typical thing, I'm getting my groceries, and you're passing so many strangers, and that's so many little acts of love that you could be having there. Walking down, instead of like looking down, you'll be looking up, making eye contact with the strangers, having a light smile. And that sounds very say surface level, right? But maybe no one has smiled at that person today. Maybe it's a little bit scary, because say you make eye contact and then one of those strangers just kind of like, like mean mugs you while you're smiling at them. That's happened to me many times. But a lot of the times I'll also make eye contact with people who look like, just like, but they'll see me smiling lightly at them and they'll smile back. And it's a little sweet thing. Maybe no one has acknowledged them today. I remember once I was at a store and I kind of like try to compliment people, like genuinely, like a genuine compliment, not just like, oh, I love your shirt, even though I hate that shirt, not like that. But I'll try to find something to compliment them on, kind of just to leave like a little bit of sweetness on them. And I remember I was buying something, and I told this woman, I really love your necklace. That's a beautiful necklace. And then she said, thank you. And she told me about how she got it when she was a little girl or something. And she said, you're the only person that's appreciated me today. And she said those exact words. And I kind of got like chills on me, because a lot of people wouldn't use those exact words, right? But it really verbalized perfectly what a lot of people experience. A lot of people don't feel appreciated throughout the day. Maybe everyone has been treating them badly, like, or just not acknowledging their existence at all. And that's not love, not acknowledging one another's existence. So, in those little acts of like just making eye contact with a stranger down the street and smiling, that's acknowledging somebody's existence. And that's acknowledging their worth, as a child of God. Um, yeah, so little things like that, being intentional in that. Like when you come home, maybe you see some dishes on the counter. It's like, if they're dirty, put them in the sink or wash them. And that's a little bit of, that's a little act of love that perhaps no one's going to notice, but they would have noticed if it hadn't been done. Say the person who typically washes the dishes is like, kind of come home and be like, oh wow, the counters are clean, nice, or they would have come home if you hadn't done that, and be like, oh, there's a lot of dirty dishes on those counters. So it's like those little things. Maybe folding the blankets because you see them unfolded on somebody's bed. They're gonna come into the room and be like, man, that like those blankets are nice and tidy. I thought I was gonna come into like a messy bed or something like that. Then finding little ways to love one another in the daily things. But yes. Oh, and something a quote that I read, it says, death will not con me out of life. Just because there is suffering does not mean I'm gonna forget about all the beautiful things, right? And I love that. For example, I haven't been able to walk too well recently, and that could make me really sad. And sometimes, because I love walking and I love being active and I love exploring, and I can't really do that too much right now. And the other day I was gonna cry about it because I felt really sad about it, But then I was like, you know what? There's so many sweet things going on right now. I think it was like Thanksgiving, and it's like we're preparing some delicious food, and we have our family here, and we have guests here, and we're sharing such a warm moment. And it's like there's so much beauty, so much love going on around me. I'm not gonna let the little suffering of not being able to walk too well right now like con me out of enjoying all of the rest of this beauty. And that goes like even towards bigger things in life. For example, some people might have experienced a loss, and it's like, yeah, that is heavy, but that doesn't mean their world is ending. It's not letting that suffering enslave you and control you and take over your entire mind. Not allowing that, but being like, I acknowledge that it hurts. I acknowledge that everything doesn't feel like it's completely okay right now. But there's so many little beautiful things that are going on around me, to the simplest things. I'm glad that I am here. I'm glad that I can breathe without having issues about it. I'm glad that I can eat food without having to worry about can I eat food later, you know? I'm glad that I have friends that can help me through this, you know, things like that. Not allowing the negative to completely take over and just make you forget about the beautiful in the mundane, in the daily life. And yeah, that's basically how you find God in the little things, because God is love, you know? God is light. God is hope. Things like that. In my perspective, I feel like that is what serving God is in our daily life. It's not always about completely, you know, being at church all day and being a nun. That's as well serving God, you know, nonetheless. But I mean, as a lot of laity, as a lot of normal people, quote unquote, you know, it's like, how do we serve God? And it's like, that's how you do it. You don't have to find a bunch of extra time to spend it all at church. You can do it with the time in the schedule that you have right now, you know, in being intentional with the way that you love, or in simply allowing God to change the way that you think internally, instead of letting yourself become bitter about some interaction that you had. Letting God soften your heart and be like, you know what? Let me take that as a reminder to not treat other people like that in the future. And you end up taking something good from it, you know? And maybe you even bless that person. Something I had written down a while back was, don't be afraid to look for God in the hardships, in the trials, in the rough situations. He is here. And this is also part of finding God in the mundane, right? God is not some kind of amulet. God is not going to make your life just perfect and nothing bad's ever going to happen and everything's going to be great just the way you planned it. No, God's not like that. But I was like, you know, God's not like that. God is more so that He's going to walk you through that suffering. God is going to walk you through that hardship. For example, God doesn't change your reality. God changes your insights, like what I was talking about earlier. So if you, say, have some kind of illness, God isn't, what do you call it? Like, forced to heal you just because you serve Him. He is not just forced to heal you because you ask Him to and because you believe in Him. You know, that's part of living the faith. It's realizing that God is with you, even if He has not healed you physically. Say, for example, me with my legs right now that I can't walk too well. It's like realizing that despite the suffering, perhaps God is teaching me something through it. You know, God is teaching me to slow down. God is teaching me to appreciate what I do have and what does work wonderfully in my body, to appreciate the health that is flourishing for me, and also to make better habits, you know, to be able to take better care of myself when I'm older as well. And this is teaching me like the details about how the human body works, because I did a bit of research. It's teaching me those kind of things so I can better take care of myself. And by knowing how to better take care of myself when I have kids, I'm going to be able to better take care of my children, you know, and make sure that they are well taken care of, healthy, build good habits. And it's like all of that great stuff out of something that was perhaps not too great, that I can't walk too well right now. And it's like, I feel like that's what God does. You know, he brings something good out of the bad. He brings something good out of the bad. He's not gonna just take all of the bad stuff out of your life, but He's gonna ensure that there is hope at the end of that bad trial, you know? He's gonna be that hope at the end of that tunnel, and He's gonna bring something. He's gonna bring light out of that darkness, you know? He's gonna bring healing out of that brokenness. He's gonna bring a beautiful, flourishing future out of perhaps a past that could be shameful. You know, things like that. He's gonna heal a broken heart. You might ask, why did God allow my heart to be broken? But there's also a quote that says, the cracks, the brokenness is what lets the light in. And it's so true. And I feel like that's why God continues to allow those little bad things to happen in our lives. He doesn't cause them, but He permits them. You know, He's like, well, You didn't learn the lesson the good way, the easy way. I guess I'm gonna have to permit something bad to happen to you, and you're gonna realize that you need me, and you're gonna come back to me, and I'm gonna help you. Like a parent, your kid goes and they trip and they bleed and they're crying and they're like, Mama, my knee's bleeding, help me. And then you go there and you help them. I feel like that's exactly the way God is with us when we get a little bit hurt and bruised by life. I was thinking about something earlier about how it's funny how our actions really affect other people's actions. And about this quote, it ties into this quote that says, evangelizing with your actions, not your words. And this ties in very well with living love in the mundane, meeting God in the daily life, right? For example, say you start making someone coffee every morning. You wake up an hour earlier because they wake up early. You wake up an hour earlier to make them coffee in the morning. That's a little act of love. That's a little act of meeting God right there, and being kind to someone else. And they're like, oh, that's so nice, right? They feel a little bit extra cared for. And now, say, in their heart, they kind of begin to soften up a bit. And they're like, I want to do something nice for them as well, right? Now, say you come home from a long day of work and, let me think of something. Maybe your favorite drink is hot cocoa. So then they have some hot cocoa already boiling for you, right? And then you come home and you're like, they hadn't done that before. They weren't that nice before. And it's funny because that's evangelizing in a way, right? You're motivating them, you're inspiring them, and in a way you're teaching them without actually forcefully teaching them to love, to let love in and to give love. Because just because you started making them coffee, just because they feel a little bit extra cared for, they want to make you feel a little bit extra cared for as well. And perhaps they go out and be a little bit nicer at work too, because they feel a little bit extra loved, right? So they want to share a little bit of extra love. And I feel like that's exactly what evangelizing is, right? It's spreading love, letting others feel loved, letting others meet love, and in turn they choose to love, because God is love. So that is evangelizing. That is spreading God in our daily lives in the simplest ways. We don't have to be priests, we don't have to be nuns, we don't have to be missionaries. We're already missionaries in our daily life, right? We're already missionaries in our little daily actions. And it's so beautiful to me. It kind of struck home. I hadn't thought about it in that perspective before until I was writing about it. And I was like, wait, that is so cool. That is so precious. But yes. And something that someone had said to me once before when I first became a Catholic they said a quote, solo por hoy, which means only for today. You don't have to plan out your whole life about how you're going to serve God perfectly forever and ever and ever. It's like, nah, bro, you just have to serve God today. Make that choice to serve God today because it's a hard walk, You're not always going to be wanting to treat everybody wonderfully and who knows what else. But you only have to tackle today, right? You only have to focus on being loving today, and that's going to build a habit. So it's going to be a little bit easier to be more loving tomorrow, I think. Maybe, perhaps. Because as we kill that ego today, it's going to be a little bit more flat tomorrow. That way it's going to be easier to kill the ego tomorrow. You know what I mean? Things like that. And you don't have to worry about, like, how am I going to get to this destination in the future? It's trusting in God's will, right? All I have right now truly is the present. All I have right now is the choice of what I'm going to do right now, right? Or of how I'm going to react right now, having that choice. So if you're intentional with loving right now, you wake up tomorrow and you're intentional with loving tomorrow. You don't have to pretend you're perfect. You don't have to pretend you're ever going to be perfect. Or that it's ever just going to come all naturally to you. You're just going to be full of love and who knows what else. No, it's not realistic. We're human. We get in bad moods. We have bad days. We sometimes have a tendency to be selfish, And it's like, it's not pretending that none of that exists, but it's taking that into consideration and being like, I'm going to make the choice right now to put aside my ego, to put aside my pride, to put aside my comfort, and to act out of love, in service for somebody else. And that's it. Just right now, only for today, choosing to serve God in the mundane, choosing to find God in the mundane, to find love and live love and share love. And that sounds so hippie, but it's very much Catholic. But yes, that was all that I had to say basically. Just it was something I was thinking about while I was praying about, finding God in the mundane and such. So thank you for listening. Thank you for sharing this time with me. And I hope y'all all know that y'all are very much loved. Perhaps we don't always feel it, but God always fully accepts us, fully loves us, and is always there with us despite the trials. Okay, bye bye.